So just to kind of provide some context to the session today. So Strativity, we are a culture design and transformation firm that really focuses on developing customer-centric organizations. All right? Now, all too often when we think about customer experience, brand loyalty, we don't think a lot about, well, what does it really mean to deliver a customer experience? You know, when we think about what it means to really build loyalty with our customers, right? Let's consider who actually has to build that loyalty. It goes beyond just the products and the services that you have to offer, and it really gets at the heart of your people, and really gets at the heart of your people and how you're delivering on your brand promise, right? So what we're going to focus today on is really thinking about, well, what does it really mean to consistently deliver an exceptional experience? I think Doug from Pro really set this session up nicely this morning, because I think he's a clear example of somebody that has really lived this and breathed this. All right. Secondly, we're going to focus a lot on understanding the emotional customer journey. I think a lot of times when we think about customer journeys, we think about the functional needs and how to service customers throughout their various touch points. But what are the emotions that are driving their decision making? The one thing I will say that I do differ a little bit in some of the things that Doug said this morning, as well as what we kind of think about as an industry, is when we talk about rational versus emotional decision making. Right? Reality is, depending on what your emotional state is, will drive how rational a decision you will make. Right? So they're not independent of each other. Right? If you're really upset about something, you're going to make an irrational decision. And guess what? If you're really excited about something, you can make an irrational decision too and be very impulsive in your decision making. So understanding the emotional journey and understanding both the functional and emotional needs of customers along that journey and how you serve those needs essentially is what cultivates brand loyalty over time. Right? So we're going to dive into that. And then really thinking about what does it really mean to design experiences with purpose. Okay? That will also improve reputation, increase customer value, and also drive business performance and sustainability. What I did like what Doug touched on this morning was we need to really kind of shift our focus from purely thinking about short-term gains and really focus on long-term brand sustainability, right, and brand health. And what does it really mean to build those types of relationships with customers? Now, we first need to recognize that over the past 20 years, things have changed. How we market to each other, how we relate to each other, how we build relationships with each other has changed. We live in a socially connected digital world now. I know a lot of times we take that for granted, but we have to really be considerate about what that truly means. Right? No longer is marketing one-to-one. No longer is marketing one-to-many. We need to think about marketing in a network sense, right? Your ecosystem of stakeholders, whether it be your customers, your employees, your partners, how the media talks about your industry, and ultimately how different cultures perceive your brand and your industry is going to have far greater influence over loyalty of your company and your brand than any marketing you're going to be able to do. So it changes the entire dynamic of how you need to communicate and how you need to build relationships with your customers. Right? It's not just about putting up a pretty brand, a new logo, thinking about how you segment your audiences and push these different communications out. It really is about cultivating relationships that are driven by being a purpose-driven type of organization and really designing purposeful experiences that engages customers in a way that they want to stay with you. You're not interested in looking at competitors. Well, what does that start to look like? Now, I'm assuming everyone here has do you have a mobile phone? Everyone has a mobile phone? Right. 20 years ago, that probably wouldn't have been the case. But what is a mobile phone? It's more than just a computer. I mean, these days it's how we engage with the world. It is an extension of self. We need to really think about that. What does that really mean to be an extension of self? It's how we share. It's how we learn. It's how we socialize, right? It's how we extend our being of human. Right? And I think all too often we get caught up on digital marketing, right? And different types of technology. But at the end of the day, since the beginning of time, technological evolution happened for one reason. Can you tell me what? Anyone? To enhance the human experience. And I think as marketers, we get so caught up on the individual tactics, and we think about digital in terms of channels. But we need to start shifting our mindsets into recognizing that, no, when we think about the fact that we live in this digitally connected world, what it means is that people now are extending themselves and bringing the world into them and engaging outward with the world. So what does that really mean for you as a brand? Right? As a brand, it changes the dynamic of that relationship. Right? People are inviting you now into their lives. They're inviting you into their intimate and personal space. So as a result, how you build relationships with people is going to be dramatically different than just trying to push advertising out to them. And I would say to date, we've probably failed pretty significantly when it comes to our marketing and advertising through the mobile devices. Right? And so we need to start thinking about how we really start to leverage these different types of platforms as a means to really build these kinds of purposeful relationships. As individuals, we don't differentiate between our digital and physical selves. Right? I don't look at my phone and go, I'm engaging with a digital channel. I'm going to select email today, and I'm going to do social media tomorrow. It's not how we interact with our devices. Nor should our marketing campaigns and how we build loyalty with customers be focused in that type of way either. Now, because we do live in this socially connected digital world, right, it also means what's happening is, as brands, we need to start thinking in the sense of culture. Right? Recognizing that your brand identity and your organizational culture and popular culture are all interconnected. Right? Nothing's functioning in its own silos anymore. So if you think about popular culture and you think about your respective organizations, well, who do you employ? Who are all we? Right? We all reside in US culture, right? Depending on where your regional offices are located, you may be a part of the Northeast culture, or the New York culture, or the LA culture, or the Nashville culture. Now, every single culture comes with certain types of values. Right? Values really kind of manifest up through culture. So therefore, as an individual, as a brand, as an organization, it's important to recognize what those values are within the cultures with which you market, and also with which where your customers are. Which also means how you engage people in one culture could be different from another culture. We have certain needs, values, aspirations, priorities, and preferences in the US that are very different from other markets, right? Say within China, or Australia, or Europe, every culture is different. And so when you think about what it means to be a global organization and how you're looking to really build those relationships at a local level, it's important to also recognize that in order to provide value as a brand, you need to be thinking about those cultural systems. And here's how it looks. So, both your employees and your customers. All right? If you think about marketing in the past, it was always from like a brand or an organization outward to consumers. Well, employees are consumers too. Right? We're all consumers too. This whole us versus them dynamic has to change. Right? And one of the reasons I asked the question of who's on the brand side, who's on the provider side, because guess what? It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if you're a seller, you still work for a brand, you're still part of a company, and guess what? The brands here are your customers. And for the brands who are here, your customers also have certain expectations in terms of what role you play in providing value to them within the culture that they live in. So, if you think about the organizational culture, go back to my point about the regional offices. All right? Now, depending on where your customers and your employees are located, well, that regional office could have its own culture that is almost different from the macro organizational culture. I'm sure any of you who do work for a global organization and have to communicate with your colleagues, right, in other regions around the world, the communication friction, trying to get alignment, trying to help prioritize everything, right? It can be challenging. It can be very challenging. And when you think about now both employees and customers relate to popular culture, right? Now, if I'm an employee for a company and I have a very bad experience, and I go on Facebook tomorrow and talk about how horrible that experience is working for that company, well, I'm going to have friends and family that could also be potential customers of that company. Now, we all know how one bad meme can hurt brand reputation, right? We've seen it. Look what happened with United Airlines, right? Yeah, I see the faces. Well, let me tell you something. Let's think about what happened to United Airlines. At the end of the day, 80,000 people went to work that day for United Airlines, and they did a great job. Right? They did their job. They delivered their brand promise. Right? Fly the friendly skies. Right, is that it? But what happened to United? Well, I mean, let's really think about it. At its core, what was the problem with that situation? What went wrong that could have been done differently? Anybody?
Failed on their brand promise.
Okay, but why? And how? How did they fail? That's right. Well, let's unpack it a little bit, right? When they started offering up vouchers for people to volunteer to give up their seat, one person, they were saying it was up to $400. One person raised their hand and said, "I'll do it for $2,000." The employees laughed at that person. They laughed. They're like, "There's no way in hell we can give you a $2,000 voucher." I bet you in hindsight, oh boy, was that worth $2,000. Yes, it was. But the employees weren't empowered. They weren't empowered to make that decision. And so when we talk about what it really means to design customer-centric organizations, it's also about giving people the ability to make customer-centric decisions on the fly without having to follow all these processes and protocols that are in place in order to make a simple decision like that. Right? Now, arguably that has now costed United millions of dollars, right, in reputation management, crisis management, when $2,000 could have very easily prevented that incident from happening. Right? So when we talk about what does it really mean to deliver your brand promise consistently, that's what we're talking about, it's consistently. Remember, 80,000 did their job that day, but it was that one experience that tarnished the entire brand, and that's ultimately going to impact brand loyalty. Now, when we now think about this entire ecosystem, you have customers that are interacting with different departments and different functions. In the case of the United, they were interacting with the flight attendants, right? Flight attendants could be trained differently from, let's say, the pilots, right? From, let's say, even the restaurants within the terminals themselves, or the booking engines where you book your flights and the people that are managing that. So in order to think about what does it really mean to be consistent, you have to find that alignment. You have to figure out how do you start to now build across all of those different functions, right, processes and procedures that really are customer-centric, so you don't have incidents like this, where one small decision led to epic consequences, right? And recognizing that your employees too, right, they're functioning, they're interacting with different types of teams. We all have employees we don't like, or coworkers we don't like. We've been in those situations before, right? And all too often, what you find is within the cultures of these organizations, right? If people genuinely don't like working with each other, it does create friction. Or if people aren't trained in the same way, and they don't know how to best collaborate with each other in order to optimize the experience, right? That's going to be a problem as well, right? And then when we think about the fact that both employees and customers, right, live in a popular culture world, right? They're also going to react to how the market behaves around their brand, around their industry, right? Around their trade, right? So think about the airline business. I mean, the airline industry reputation is not so great. I mean, putting aside some of these recent incidents, right? Everybody's had just bad travel experiences, luggage being lost, right? Flights being canceled, the delays, right? The list goes on and on and on. So when we think about what does it really mean to deliver, to a differentiated promise that's delivered consistently, right? Those four key words together, what does that really mean? Well, first there's what the customers think. So let's unpack this a little bit. Differentiated. So from the customer perspective, is what you have to offer really inspiring? Is it really that differentiated from what your competitors have to offer? Right? And from a brand promise standpoint, is it something that your prospects and potential customers even desire? Right? I mean, is it something that they even want? I think all too often we go to market with different types of products, different types of services, but have you really done the homework to really determine if it's something that you're going after is even interested in? Right? And then in terms of how it's delivered, how does it come to life? What is that experience? Okay. And consistently. So does it happen every time? Now that's what customers are thinking. But we tend to neglect the employees. Right? We go out and we do all this branding, we go out and we do all this marketing and advertising. Let's face it, what is marketing? All it's doing is setting the expectation for the brand promise. It's telling you what the brand promise is and what you can expect from coming to purchase our products and services or engaging with our company. But the experience is what happens when you either meet, exceed, or fail to deliver on those expectations, which is essentially delivered by your employees. So from a differentiated standpoint, employees, do they even believe in it? If your employees don't believe in your brand, or they don't think you're better than the competition, they're not really going to be authentic in terms of how they build relationships. Right? And that's important to note, authentic. We can all fake a smile. Hi, nice to meet you. Hi, who are you? Who are you with? Okay, good, nice to meet you. We know what a fake smile looks like. But it's all about finding that authenticity, right? That passion that fuels people to want to do it and believe in it. And then from a promise standpoint, do your employees know what their role is in delivering that promise? Sometimes when we talk about brand promise and vision and strategy, it always sits right at the executive level, and then it's, we're pushing these communications out and telling employees this is what we're all about. It's one thing to tell people what they're about, but do they know how to actually deliver on that? And then in terms of how it's delivered, do they know? And then consistently, do they have the tools and the authority? So in the case of United, they didn't have the authority. Employees weren't empowered. And what are the tools that need to be put in place in order to be customer-centric, in order to deliver on that customer promise? When I say purposeful, what's the one word that comes to mind? How would you define purposeful? Intentional. Good. What else? Meaning? What does it mean to live with purpose? You can think about yourself individually too.
I have an end goal.
A goal. Good. So, yeah, meaning. I'm going to throw another one out there. One that we don't really think about too often. And this is where I want everybody to kind of start reframing their thinking about how you think about your companies, how you think about your brands, how you think about your coworkers, how you think about what your role is within your organization. There's a difference between being undifferentiated and being a purposeful brand. So, I want everybody to think about that for a second. We all have different types of relationships, right? When you love something or you love someone, you're passionate about it, and you're committed to that. What's the opposite of love? There you go. You're one of the few. I always get hate. Everybody says hate. Right? The opposite is indifference. Being passive and non-committal. Now, when you are indifferent as a consumer, you're thinking about price, right? You're thinking about comparing different types of brands, right? You have fickle behavior. You're really not committed or loyal to anyone, right? Now, when you love a brand, when you really love a brand, what happens, right? The reason you love a brand is because they're creating value, right? They're providing you with value. When you love a brand, that's where loyalty comes in. Customer love is what builds brand loyalty. Okay? And it goes back to the earlier point. getting away from focusing purely on short-term gains and really thinking about long-term sustainable relationships. Right, this is about moving from a one-night stand, right, to getting married. Right, this is about building a life partnership. You laugh, but let me tell you something. From this moment on, that's how we're going to be thinking about what does it really mean to be a purposeful brand. Think about it through that lens. Think about what it really means to build relationships. So we do have a saying at Certivity, right? The margins are in the memories. I want everybody in this room right now. Don't worry, I'm not going to call you out specifically, but I want you to think about that one experience you had with a particular brand. Whether it be exceptional experience or whether it was a horrific experience. You can go back as far as your memories can go back. All right? Everybody got it? Can you think about it? Who can, everybody has it? All right, so I'm not going to ask you what the experience was, but was it good or bad, and how far back does your memory go?
Bad. And this was
15 years ago. Okay.
bad, and it was 16.
You were 16 years old?
No,
Or
sorry,
16 years?
16 years ago.
16 years ago.
About 5 years ago.
Okay. What about good? Any good ones here? In the back? Good, and how long? How far back?
About 3 years ago.
Okay. Anyone wants to go further back?
Oh, it wasn't further back.
Okay. Okay. How far?
Good 16 years ago.
16 years ago. Proving the point, right? Right. It's about the memories that we're creating. And memories are built, is what builds relationships. So here's how I want you to think about relationships. Whether it is a relationship with your significant other, right? Whether it's a relationship with an object, the brain goes through a very similar process, okay? For example, I have a strong relationship to this water. When I drink it, I know exactly the value it's going to provide me. I don't have to give it much thought. Now, if I have to make a big purchase like a car or a house, it might take a little bit longer to kind of go through this process. But this is a framework I want you to think about when I think about the emotional journey. And what does it really mean to go on this emotional journey? All right? The first thing, from a communication standpoint, and this is where all the marketers come into play here, right? How should it look, sound, and speak to me? Right? So if you think about your marketing, that's what your marketing is doing. All right? Think about when you get into a relationship with somebody, when you first start dating somebody. You go through the same thing. Now listen, you say what you will, but everybody here is marketing themselves when they go on that first date, right? Then, from a perception standpoint, well, okay, you're communicating with me. How do you make me feel? How does it make me feel? Okay. We all go through this, right? If it's a product, all right, this looks like something that could be interesting to me. I like the way they're catering to my needs, they're catering to my values, my aspirations. Perfect. They get a second date. And then from an education standpoint, what do I need to know to make me try it? Right? So what is it that's going to really, what do I need to know in order to really drive some sort of action? And then the motivation really is about how will it improve or enhance my life? If we think about every relationship, right? That second date, that third date, the first time you go and purchase a product, right? I know when I drink this water, it quenches my thirst. So it's an improvement to my life, right? But what's it going to take to motivate action? Right? What's really the incentive? What is the value proposition that is causing me to take some sort of action? And then after I do make a purchase, try the product, right? Did it meet or exceed my expectations? Because that's really going to determine whether or not I start to become a loyal customer. And how will I share my experience? I mean, I'm not one for kissing and telling, but, right, if somebody has a great experience for your brand, well, guess what? You want them to tell the world, yeah, that was great, it was phenomenal. Go on Facebook, go on Twitter, what have you, share, go on Yelp, right? Talk about how great that experience is. But where the loyalty comes in is will it continue to fulfill my needs and desires, right? Because it's not about that one-time shot, right? It's how you're building and cultivating that relationship. When we talk about loyalty and retention, let's really unpack what loyalty and retention means. You have to continue to satisfy those needs, their values, their aspirations, time and time again, or you're not going to build that loyalty. So, since we're talking about airlines, like I set that up. Delta is actually a client of ours. This is the only time we're going to pat ourselves on the back here. So we trained all of the Delta flight attendants. I want to show you the difference between a Delta and United. Now don't get me wrong, Delta's got, they have their issues like everybody else. So this is coming out of Seattle, the flight attendants that we train. This is a letter from a customer that I want to read with you, and then we're going to exercise this out a little bit. We'll exercise, I want to take you through. So, Dear Delta, my mom and dad who live in Los Angeles have been on me to, have invited me to visit them. My son, who is 5.5 years old, and I set off to from Seattle to Los Angeles on Delta. While waiting for the flight, we visited a book candy junk store in the concourse. A couple of snacks and a Seattle snow globe toy for my boy. It was an evening flight and we had a meal on the plane. I enjoyed a couple of glasses of wine en route. When we landed, I went to get my backpack for my boy to put the snow globe into. But I bumped him slightly and the globe went flying. Shattered all over the ground. My son started to sob and I apologized and asked him to be brave. To my amazement, he got himself together and I thanked him. We told the flight attendant about the broken globe on the floor and to make sure they clean up around the seats so nobody gets hurt. We spent a couple of days visiting Grandma and Grandpa. That did not go as I wish it would have. We discussed stuff from how to bring up kids to current politics, etc. My mom gives her opinion, I give mine, and then she says I'm wrong. Oh, the joy of it. We head back from Los Angeles to Seattle to join my wife and daughter back at home. My son reminds me that he's still disappointed about the snow globe, the snow globe issue that happened earlier. As the plane pulls up to the gate in Seattle, and the dong sounds ring, so we can remove our seatbelts and crowd the aisles waiting to deplane, an announcement comes over the loudspeaker. Mark and Eli Spiegelman, after deplaning, please see the attendant at the gate. That was not good. I'm thinking that something has happened to my folks or my family. We depart the plane and go to the attendants outside the gate. I tell them we are Mark and Eli and that there was a page for us. The two uniformed gals approached us. They said, we understand that on your way to Los Angeles, your snow globe was broken and your son was very upset. So we bought you another one and put another gift also inside the bag. I could not believe what I was hearing. We opened the bag and a new snow globe and a stuffy toy were inside. I hugged both of them. My son was beaming with joy. I realized what must have gone into this. The flight attendant took note of where we were sitting and alerted management. Management looked at us, looked us up, and found we had a return trip. They sent someone shopping in the store, right? Bought the globe and another toy, wrapped it all up, then had two attendants meet us on our flight and give us the gifts. We have all had our share of bad commercial experiences, but this was an incredible gesture, beautifully executed by Delta Airlines. Thank you, Delta, you really shined. Now, these are the kinds of things that we want to hear from all of our customers, right? I mean, those are the experiences that are memorable. I'm going to tell you right now, that customer is going to remember that story for the rest of his life. And he's going to tell everybody about that story. When we talk about the margins or the memories, that's what we're talking about, okay? So, I want to, now that you've all heard that story, let's really think about that story. And let's think about also how this relates to your brains. So this is this is basically our take on an empathy map. If you're not familiar with an empathy map, this is really, when we talk about what at the root of customer centricity, it's really understanding your customers from their point of view, right? So it's looking at what did the customer see during the experience, right? What did the customer think about their experience? How did the customer feel during their experience? And what did the customer say about their experience? So you guys just heard the story. Aside from the examples I've got given here, right? What did the customer see during the experience? What was unique?
It's very personalized. It occurred over a period of time, so it's active participation by the brand. It's not passive participation. So it takes a huge commitment and the realization, the complexity. I think you're just going to kind of tune into the complexity of that and it's going to build a huge emotional connection with the brand.
Yeah. Now, what was going through the customer's mind? What was he thinking?
That's above and beyond.
It's above and beyond. Yeah. Exceeded expectations. Right? These are the wow factors. These are the loyalty builders. Right? Look, just delivering a decent experience, I'm just going to get you to the parity line. Right? But if you really want to deliver a purposeful experience, you need to go above and beyond. Right? How'd the customer feel? Important. And what else? Special, appreciated, valued, right? These are the feelings that we want to make sure that every single customer we interact with feels. Doesn't matter what kind of a customer it is. These are relationships, right? If there's one thing you're going to take away from today, this is how you build relationships with people. Doesn't matter what kind of people they are, I assure you. And of course, what did the customer say? Well, the entire letter is what they said, right? And I'm sure it's going to go beyond that, all right? So, when we think about this evolution of differentiation, since the early 20th century, businesses were very product-centric, right? It was all about the money, all right? Let's deliver a product, create demand, make money, right? It's this kind of prioritized cycle that was really only one way. Then, from around 1990 to 2000, it became very process-centric, right? It was all about creating efficiencies, doing it quicker, right? Making sure we're fast to market, making sure we're giving customers what they want quickly, right? This is really the era of the service provider, right? And then from 2000 to today, it's all about perception. How we're influencing perception, right? How are we delighting customers? But we are now in a new age where it is about purpose, right? And that's what's going to become your differentiator. What's your why? We've all heard this of late, right? It's all about your why, what's your purpose, what's your reason for being. But this is what really starts to move you from being that one-night stand to a life partner, right? Now, so when you're thinking about your customer experience, you need to be thinking, well, who are you? What is your role in the customer relationship? Are you just a utility? Are you just a tool? They need you for something very specific. They come to you, take care of that, okay, good, on to the next thing, and don't really think about you after that? Or are you really providing them with a holistic experience where they want to be your life partner? Right? They want to turn to you whenever they're in need of something that you have to offer. That's a big switch. That's a big difference. But in order to do that, you need to make sure that the entire organization is functioning in a way that's delivering on that. So these are some very high-level design principles when you're thinking about how you're designing purposeful customer experiences. Right? First thing, make sure it's easy and timely. Right? You want it to be a smooth and seamless transaction. Respect customers' time. Okay? You also want to make sure that you're anticipating their needs. Guide them. Sherpa them along through the process. Make it seamless for them. All right? And also tell them something that they don't know. Right? Be that valued partner. Okay? Guide them. And make sure it's personalized. So you do need to get to know them. You do need to understand what target memories you want to link with them. You do need to understand their needs, their values, their aspirations, their preferences, their priorities, and tailor the entire experience for them. And like I said earlier, be authentic. Show that you care about your customers. Value them. And show them that you value them. Okay? And then lastly, make sure it's memorable. Surprise them. Inspire them. You want them to be excited to work with you. So, actually, who here knows their brand promise off the top of their head? This is our brand promise, so I don't want to focus so much on that. Does somebody have a brand promise? Otherwise, we can lean on this one. Yes. What's your brand promise?
To deliver lifelong memories for our guests.
To deliver lifelong memories for your guests. What business are you in?
We create unique experiences for loyalty, employee engagement.
Okay. So now I want everybody to kind of think about that. Say it one more time so everybody can remember it.
To deliver lifelong memories for our guests.
Deliver lifelong memories for our guests. It's a good one for the theme, right? So, in order to deliver lifelong memories for your guests, right? Now, we're all employees now of this company. What's your company?
Imagine experience.
Imagine Experience. So we're all employees now for Imagine Experience. Now let's do a little bit of empathy mapping for the employees. Because in order to deliver on that promise, all of your employees at every single touch point along the customer journey need to understand what their role is in order to deliver on that promise. Right? So, to deliver on that promise, how do employees need to feel?
Empowered.
They need to feel empowered. Right, what else?
Special.
They need to feel special. They do. They need to feel like, you know what, they're working for a company that treats them well. How do they need to think? How do they need to think in order to deliver on that brand promise and to deliver that purposeful experience?
As if they own the company.
As if they own the company. Okay, what else?
The person getting it deserves it.
That's right. They actually need to believe in the value of that customer. Right? They have to understand the value that that customer has to the company and also to them personally too. Right? So now, in order to deliver those memories, what do the employees need to do?
You know, how to make that person feel special.
They need to be equipped. Right? And that's important to recognize. It's about being inspired to be able to deliver on that promise. They have to be empowered to deliver on it. And they need to be equipped with the tools and the skills in order to deliver on it. If you don't do that, it doesn't matter what new marketing campaign you come out with or what new products you come out with. If your employees are not delivering on the promise, it all fails. And you wonder why our conversion rates are so low. Screw your conversion rates, right? Get your people delivering, all right? Get your people building loyalty. Get your people being purpose-driven. Get them thinking customer-centric, okay? This also means you need to rethink your brand architecture. So, from a brand architecture standpoint, we're all used to hearing about vision and purpose and mission, but really thinking about your vision, your purpose, your mission, what you really believe from a values and principles standpoint, what really differentiates you from a value proposition, and what are you really committing to from a brand promise standpoint. But then it's also about, from your brand personality, how are you making an impression on your customers, right? How do you need to think as an organization, both individually and collectively? And how do you need to behave, both individually and collectively? And then really thinking about from a responsibility standpoint, all right, how are you going to care for your customers? How are you going to care for your employees? How are you going to care for your communities that you serve? And from the memory standpoint, how will you be remembered? And the products, that's really how you go to market. Right? Your products and services are how how your brand promise manifests itself. So what we're really looking at here is your what and your how. And all too often, we focus so much on the what and not enough on the how. And so when we do talk about brand identity and we talk about brand identity and culture, you have to create the culture that can deliver on the how. All right? And that really comes down to this experience delivery infrastructure. So it's how you're communicating both internally and externally, right? It's what education and training programs you have in place for your employees so that you do inspire, empower, and equip them. And then how are you disseminating that throughout the entire organization across all the different functions, right? That becomes a bigger operational play. And then most importantly, how are you measuring your performance? How are you quantifying how well you're delivering on your brand identity across all touch points, across all functions? Okay? So we're gonna jump into another exercise here. So we got to think about this. There's your organizational purpose and your individual purpose. Okay? As an organization, right, at the highest level, you need to decide what is the vision, what is the promise, right? What's the strategy for delivering that promise, and thinking about the platform. So what kind of a culture are you going to create in order to deliver on that? And how do you start to shift from this short-term gains to really building a sustainable culture that can consistently deliver on this brand promise? But then at the individual level, it's also about giving every single individual a purpose. All right? Now, that could come in many different ways. But most importantly, it's what's that individual purpose in that role, and recognizing that they are connected to a much bigger purpose than just doing their day-to-day tasks, right? They're part of the organization. right? So, and when we think about what the behaviors and the mindset that's going to be required in order for them to be passionate about delivering that brand promise, you have to get it to a place where it becomes intrinsic. When we think about that authenticity, it's when it becomes intrinsic. They're not thinking about it. They're just naturally doing it. And what are the things that are going to keep them motivated? Oh, I'm sorry. And then lastly, on the practice side, you got to give them tools. You got to give them the training, right? You have to make sure that they're confident that they can even deliver on your brand identity and deliver a purposeful experience. And making sure that they're committed to it and that they want to do it, right? This isn't about commitment in that, do it or you're going to get fired. This is about them wanting to commit because they feel that this is them living their purpose, right? And if we think about listen, we talk about employees, we talk about customers, we're all employees, we're all customers, okay? Every single one of us in our respective roles, we want to be fulfilled in our job, right? We want to be fulfilled in what we're doing. We don't want to feel like we're just living an empty life, collecting a paycheck, not really having any kind of impact in the world. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's a few of us here that just like that. I'm not one of those. So let's think about your organizations, right? Now we can think about this a little bit more in general, right? We don't have to think about a specific brand promise or a specific organization, but when we think about the organizational purpose, how do we share the vision and inspire customer centricity? What are different ways you can do that within your organization?
Obviously, talk about changing the culture, making it more open, talking to them about the value of the customers. You mentioned information, having more open informational exchange.
Yep.
And you maybe starting with small steps, kind of iterative processes that show them that they do have control, they do have the ability to make an impact.
Yeah, and also to build on that too, it's also about having this kind of trusting relationship too, right? Eliminating kind of this like fear of reprisal or feeling like, oh my gosh, if I do something wrong, I'm going to get in trouble. Right? How do you create a culture where you give people the space to fail, and if they do make a mistake or something, they're not being scolded for it, using it as a coaching opportunity, right? So from a platform standpoint, how do we start to facilitate a cultural transformation that's customer centric? What needs to start happening? Any ideas? Has anybody started doing this within their own organizations? What are some things that you've done to become more customer centric?
Obviously, benchmark kind of where you are today in a very candid and open way, getting some customer feedback, getting feedback from your customers and your employees as to where they perceive it is now.
Yeah.
Obviously, being able to proactively listen is the first step.
Yeah. So actually, in both those examples, right, it is about, as an organization, right, it goes back to creating that infrastructure, right? But now, if we move into empowering people with their individual purpose, right, what do you need to do? All right, I'm assuming most of us in this room are managing people or work with other people, right? So what's needed think about yourselves, in order to stay motivated and to be intrinsically customer centric? What do you need in order to do that?
I need to feel as important as the customer does to my owner.
What else?
And my opinion matters.
Your opinion matters. Right. And what do you need to feel confident and committed to delivering a customer-centric, purposeful experience?
I need to see it in action. I need to see my leaders living the promise. Otherwise, it's just words that mean nothing.
So you just touched on something very strong. When we talk about culture change within an organization, it starts at the top. Right? We say culture change cascades. Okay? If leadership's not behind the transformation, it's not going to happen. You'll have individuals, right, that'll kind of take on their own leadership role and do what they need to do in order to live a purposeful life, right, in their jobs. But in order to be a purposeful organization, it starts at the top, right? Otherwise, you're not going to see that type of transformation. You're not going to see that change. Okay, so just to kind of sum things up here, when we think about what it really means to optimize the brand experience, right? Think of this as kind of like a little checklist. First thing, do some journey mapping, right? Figure out how satisfied customers are with the current experience across all those different touch points, right? Think about all the interactions customers have with your organization, right? And see how satisfied they are along that journey. Look at your moments of truth, right? These are where the pain points and unmet needs are across different touch points along the customer journey, right? Let me tell you something. Eliminating the pain points and unmet needs, when we talk about just kind of getting to that parity line, that's all that is. You're not even building loyalty at this point, okay? Let's just make sure you're eliminating pain points and unmet needs. Let me tell you something, if you have dissatisfied customers, right, or they have poor experiences along your journey, before you start getting into anything else, whether it be rewards programs or incentives or buy one, get one free types of offer, like figure out how you can actually just create a frictionless experience first, all right? And then everything else you can add on top of that, right? And then do a needs assessment. So making sure you are understanding your customers, both their functional and the emotional needs along, throughout their experience. And then now focus on the relationship drivers, right? So if you think about the whole experience, how do you build customer love? How can you build brand loyalty? What are those wow factors, right? What are the ways that really differentiate you? And think about your future state, right? So when we think about how to consistently deliver your brand promise, set your goals, right? And look, it's one thing, everything that you saw before this is really understanding your current state, right? What the current experience is with customers. But then what you want to do is, you want to define what your future state goals are and innovate. And you do. This is about creating an innovative culture of customer centricity, right? Constantly innovating. Change is happening at a faster and faster pace. Customers' needs and their expectations are evolving all the time. So you have to think about how you keep evolving as well. And so make sure innovation is just woven into the fabric of your entire culture. Process mapping. So once you've identified all the new ways that you can optimize the experience delivered on that brand promise, how do you make sure you operationalize it with the right tools and new processes in order to deliver on it? And when we think about digital, right? Digital transformation. It's all about how you use digital technology to deliver the optimized experience that you touch on. It's not digital for the sake of digital. It's all about enhancing the human experience. And lastly, keeping employees engaged, right? So how will you continue to inspire and empower employees to deliver on that optimized experience? Right, so just to close out here, these are the key takeaways I want you to really walk away with today, all right? First, customer-centered design. Put the customer at the center of everything that you do. Design experiences with their needs, their values, and their aspirations in mind, okay? Think about the customer journey, not from the time a sale is closed, right? It's a cradle to grave journey. I mean, depending on what brand you're in, you could brand, what type of brand you are, you've got brands that have been around for hundreds of years, right? I'll tell you right now, that journey started from when we were kids, right? And how we feel about that brand or how our parents introduced us to that brand. And then assessing the functional and emotional needs. Remember that the memories are your loyalty currency. Right? Remember that culture change cascades throughout the organization. Making sure that we're committed, right, to sustain the optimized experience. And remember that passion and purpose, right, is what really delivers the experience. Okay, that's really what's going to set you apart from the competition. And let us never forget that every single one of us are employees. Every single one of us, right, are responsible for delivering our brand promises and creating those purposeful experiences. So make sure that you are the experience that you want to create. All right? Thank you.